Howdy everybody, welcome once again to another episode of the Neighborhood Naturalist. I'm Mr. Bob, your host, Bob Langston from the North Carolina Zoo, and I have selected again another wonderfully hot day. We're actually out in the sunshine today because I'm going to show you one of the lawn care tips you can use if you don't want to pollute the waterways or put out noxious chemicals that can harm wildlife, can harm your pets, and can also do some damage to some of the other things. We all have stuff we need to control. And in most yards, mine is no exception, we get stray grass that pops up that we don't really want. Think about it in between seams and cracks in the driveway and the sidewalk. So, one of the common solutions is to go over to the home and garden store or the farm store and pick up a commercial weed killer. And many of those have some chemicals in them that are not particularly good for the environment for us. One of those is called glyphosate. And glyphosate got some really bad press over the last few years. Used properly, it's generally not all that harmful. Used properly and for a home application. But some of us still would prefer not to use it. So I'm going to show you a very, very simple, non-toxic weed killer you can make right at home that's very, very easy. And it combines two things. Well, three. This is nothing more than white distilled vinegar. Vinegar is an acid, and it's been diluted down to about a 5% acid. It's not terribly strong, but if you have a cut on your hand, it will burn. Not real bad. The other item is plain old salt, table salt. This part is really important, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But this is sodium chloride, table salt. This stuff is not expensive. This jug of stuff is about $2.50. This is 50 cents. And then we need some water. Now you'll notice I'm using an old vinegar jug here, but it's been marked NaCl, saline. That means a sodium chloride saline solution, salt water. I left plenty of room in here because I'm going to add salt to this in just a moment, show you how it's done. And then we'll top it off with this water over here. That's all it is. Water, salt, vinegar. That's all it takes. So in order to mix up your grass killer, and I'll call it grass killer because, you know, weeds are just flowers that I didn't plant for the most part. So this has got this sticky little seal on it, and you'll need to break that somehow or another. And you get your spout, and you'll add salt to your water. It dissolves a little bit better if it's warm. That's why I let it sit out here on the top of the table. I'm just going to let this dump. The reason why I said you want to use table salt. Table salt is sodium chloride, and the sodium is actually the element that's really, really bad for grass. Once it gets into the soil, sodium is toxic to a lot of different plants, so it means they won't grow back. That's kind of important. You need to know where you're putting this so that you don't poison the soil for plants in the future. So in this case, I just use it on a driveway in order to take care of the grass that grows up in between the cracks. So I really don't care if grass comes up back there again. Why you need to watch what you use. I was working with a fellow about a year ago, and he was talking about trying to make up his own weed killer because inappropriately placed grass killer. He was telling me that, oh yeah, I've been using Epsom salt, and that's not having any effect at all. And I told him that it won't because Epsom salt is not sodium chloride. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfide or sulfate. And it's actually a fertilizer. So that kind of salt probably won't have all the problems. Even if you use sea salt and things like that, that's going to have potassium and calcium and other salts in it. And it's not necessarily going to hurt the grass. So then we're going to top this off with a little bit extra water here. I just didn't know how much space the salt was going to take up. We'll top that off, leave enough room so that it'll stir. And I say stir, I'm actually going to give it a shake. This is the one you want to make sure that the lid screws on pretty tight. And you're just going to agitate this a little bit so that it mixes up the salt. This is about it. Now, one of the things I will tell you is when you do this and you put it in your garden sprayer over here, you will need to clean your garden sprayer out because the salt will collect around the nozzle and it'll clog it up. You'll have to take it apart and clean it or rinse it. It's not going to be super duper noxious. Mine is pretty much all plastic. I used to use ones when I was much younger that had a lot of brass and metal in them. That's not necessarily, this is going to do a number on that, so you need to make sure it's good and clean. My little sprayer here is only a gallon, but it's got a line for a half gallon. So I mix this stuff up half and half. And what's really great is that after I'm finished and I have half gallon of vinegar left over and a half gallon of salt water, I can mix it up in one of the jugs and just mark it as grass killer. So we're going to put a half gallon of white vinegar in there. You can use cider vinegar. It's just a little more expensive this time of year. Just you're going for that acid content. And of course now we've got some salt water mixed up and we're going to top this off. Get it up to the full gallon mark. And do that. That's really all there is to it. Water, salt, vinegar. So you apply this. Normally if I'm putting stuff out, I'll wear gloves, and I don't have to do that with this. It's not necessarily toxic. Basically you get salty vinegar. So if you're from eastern North Carolina and of English extraction like I am, this is basically barbecue sauce. Eastern North Carolina barbecue is largely kind of salty vinegar, and that's how we cook pork out east. But anyhow, that's one of the traditions quite often that English settlers back in the late 1500s, early 1600s, all the way up through the full colonial period of America, quite often they would have a jar of salt water, seawater, and just add some vinegar to it to add flavor to different things. So that's kind of a seasoning. It's one of the things. It's also quite good for wiping out grass where you don't want it. You may have to apply more than once, and that's okay. Like I said, it's not terribly expensive. $2.50, 50 cents. The water came out of the tap. And this makes up actually 2 gallons worth of solution. So you can use that, and it's not particularly bad for the environment. It'll probably soak into the soil. It's not going to run off. The vinegar itself will dry out in a day or two. The water is gone out of it very quickly. And it actually forms crystals, the salt crystals as well. Whenever it rains, the crystals will become a liquid solution again, and it'll wash on down into the soil. Hopefully that'll keep the unwanted grass in between the cracks in your sidewalk and your driveway. It's really easy to apply. It's almost impossible to over-apply, but you can do that. So I'll show you how that works in just a moment or two. In doing this, we hope to keep a lot of the not-so-good chemicals out of waterways. As I showed in a previous episode, that it's real easy for things to wash off the land and into the waterways. Some of those chemicals can get into the water. They can do damage to animals. They can harm fish. They can ultimately harm us if the concentrations get too high. One of the things we often said in the world of naturalists is the solution to pollution is dilution. That means water can often do wonders for helping to take care of pollution. The problem is when I add a little bit and my next door neighbor adds a little bit, if it's the same chemical especially, or even different chemicals, and then everybody down the line adds a little bit more, whoever is at the far end of everything gets a big load of this stuff. So that's one of the reasons why we want to be very, very careful and follow directions if you are using the chemical grass killers as opposed to something like this, which is relatively natural and it's much, much milder. The reason I say that you would probably need to apply it more than once is because it is much milder. I have used straight vinegar with no salt water before. If I needed something that, I used to use that on poison ivy. You had to use a lot, so it was a little bit more expensive. So when we apply this, again, it's very simple. I just pump up my sprayer, get a little bit of pressure. I'll make sure the nozzle's not clogged here in a second. And there it is. And so I'm going to go out and put a little of this stuff out. By the way, right now, the vinegar's at the bottom, so I kind of ought to mix this up a little bit. Give it a little shake. to mix it up. So let's go apply some of this. We'll be right back. As you can see, it's really simple, really basic. You don't even have to worry about getting it on your shoes or your clothes or anything like that. North Carolina Zoo, currently open. We are taking advanced registrations and advanced ticket sales. You will need to go online to get those. We have expanded the number of people who can come into the park on any given day, and we've added a few. And we'll do that on through the rest of August, September, and until we can get past the Phase 2 COVID restrictions. Once we get to that point, things will begin to loosen up a little bit. We just don't know when that'll happen. So please visit our website and you can find out more. It's www.nczoo.org. Now, I do hope to see you. Come visit with us. We'd love to have you. But in the meantime, I am Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist. Thank you very kindly for letting me join you a little bit today. And get outside, enjoy nature, be safe. You guys take care. I'll see you again next time. Bye now.